All right,
thank you all for coming to the World of Warcraft group interview. I will let them do all the talking, I promise. So we got about an hour with you guys now, so there's plenty of time. I know there's lots of questions here. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll just take it away. If you got a question, raise your hand, they'll call on you, and we'll just take it in turn. With that, would you guys introduce yourselves?
All right, thank you all for coming out. My name is Frank Kowalkowski. I am the technical director on World of Warcraft. A little bit about what the technical director does. I manage the engineering team. We cooperate a lot with designers, artists, sound, production, to kind of bring a lot of the pieces together. Everything from rendering the game to, the live service that runs the game that we all log into. A lot of that gets encompassed and put under my purview.
I'm Steve Aguilar. I'm the assistant art director on World of Warcraft. My responsibility is to help with the vision for the game. So I'll be collaborating with also Frank's team, designers, to help tell the narrative, as well as getting our biz dev team up and running to get sort of blue sky those ideas.
Okay, so we'll try to do our best to get to questions, but if anyone has one, just raise your hand and we'll call on you.
So with level squish, what happened to characters like that are at max level? Like, you have scaling on all zones, right? All expansions. So what if I'm level 120? Will suddenly Hogger be a threat to me because it's scaling up to 50 now, and I'm 50 as well?
I think that's a good question. I think we're going to figure out a lot of the details as we go through. That's certainly not the intent. Would be like if you've already progressed all the way through a lot of the content in Battle for Azeroth. We going back to Hogger, he's not going to one-shot you.
So I'm really happy with how we've gotten all these new character customizations at the character creation screen. But what about spell customizations? Are we going to see any sort of customizations of that in regards to like, hey, I can apply this glyph and do more things, because it's been really inconsistent over the past couple of expansions?
For this particular expansion for Shadowlands, it's going to be catered to the Covenants. So they're going to make spells for, like if you're a Warlock and you're aligned with a Bastion or the Kyrian, there'll be a specific spell visual for that. So currently we are not completely at like redoing the spell effects for classes at this time, but we're focusing more on the Covenant spells and kind of adding that to the current classes.
So as a mini follow-up, so like your Warlock example, the kind of class skill that's based on them and the Covenant, that's going to be unique compared to all other classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Warlocks will have 4 different abilities to choose from as their active ability and 4 different passive abilities based on which Covenant that they've chosen. Right. Yes.
Are you able to, and what's it like transitioning to and from the Shadowlands to Azeroth? What's that? Is it just a portal like it has been in previous expansions, or is there a different way to do that?
Yeah, we want the player to be able to transition between Shadowlands and the main game. I mean, the player has a connection to Azeroth. We are her champions, and so thematically there's a reason for it. More practically, we want you to be able to go back and level with your friend if they're trying to get up. So you'll initially go in and you'll kind of be in the Maw state, but we don't ever want to put the player in a position where like, sorry, I'm in Shadowlands, I can't go back and play with my other friends. In the back.
As far as the overall design philosophies of Shadowlands, it looks like with the level squish, with class identity, some of the core elements of leveling up each level, a new spell is available X, Y, and Z. It feels like it could possibly come from a more classic philosophy. Did you look into classic as a source of inspiration for some of the mechanics in Shadowlands, and are you going to perhaps do it in the future?
That's a good question. A lot of those decisions we actually made long before Classic actually launched. Like the level squish is something we've talked about for a long time, and the primary motivation behind that was, as a new player, you look at your friends and they have that number 120 in front of them the day you log in. That's very intimidating. If I want to go get my heritage armor, even though you only need to go to 110, that's still very intimidating as maybe a Void Elf or something like that. There's a lot of levels in the game just to add it up over the years. And one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that those levels matter as well. So when you're going from 10 to 50, for instance, you'll be picking up talents, you'll be picking up spells, you'll be unlocking content. And the other aspect of the level squish we really wanted to address in the leveling in general was that sense that I'm kind of just a tourist through the world as I'm leveling up, and it feels cool if we've already been through all of those expansions and we grow organically over the last 15 years to kind of get that beat of going back to each expansion saying, yeah, I remember Wrath, I remember Mists, but you never really get to go very far before you move on to the next one. So the other thing we wanted to do was make sure that players had an opportunity to play all the way through an expansion. So you can, if you really like Wrath of the Lich King, you're going to finally get to see Ice Crown before you out level the content, and that was important to us as well because there's usually a level of story associated with each expansion, and we want players to be able to see that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On the question of the new customizations in Shadowlands, will the customization also affect? Will there be new customization options for the allied races we got now over the last expansion, or going further, even the Death Knights become like, for example, different eyes for the different specs, with red eyes for blood or something like that?
So with the character customization, we're focusing mainly on the original races, not the allied races. We are, like the eyes, for some of these races, we are being able to separate that stuff with the help of Frank's team. So that way you can have more options to choose from. But yeah, we're not going to be touching the allied races at this time. We want to first focus on the main races.
And on the Death Knights, including the old races, since Death Knights will be a focus this expansion, will their customization options be expanded?
No, those will just stay as is. We're not, because they're considered a class, they're not a race. So the customization will still stay as is and retain that, because that's something we don't want to start to harm.
Can you explain more about the legendary powers of the legendary army you'll be able to craft?
Sure, yeah. So in the center of the mall, which is this totally inhospitable zone, unlike anything we've done before, sits the Jailer's Tower, Torghast, Tower of the Damned. And it's this endless roguelike dungeon where you're going to try and go as far as you can before Torghast eventually tells you it's going to defeat you and send you back out for you to either try again or be done with. But the things you're going to pull out of Torghast you're going to take these runes to a rune crafter, a mysterious rune crafter, and they're going to basically be able to help you customize a legendary of your choice for a slot of your choice. So, if it's boots that you want, you can craft legendary boots. You can assign powers to them, maybe even secondary abilities. We're still kind of refining a lot of this, but we want to give players the agency to craft the legendary that they want for the slot that they want.
So the secondary abilities are going to be similar to Legion like affecting your talents or mistakes thing?
TBD, but we're definitely leaning toward, legendaries matter. This legendary being important to you, we want you to want to go and craft it and or upgrade it. So, second row.
Just following up on the Torghast thing, it seems like a different gameplay concept that we've seen really fleshed out this much. What is new and involved in bringing this to life? It seems like it's somewhat procedurally generated or put together from an existing set of assets. How does that work in terms of bringing that into the game?
So we have a lot of different technologies we've kind of done independently over the years, everything from like garrisons to island technology, where we've had the ability to procedurally spawn things. We've learned a lot of lessons from that from the players, and we've also learned a lot from the technology itself. So what Torghast is the levels themselves are handcrafted to maintain the Warcraft feel. We think that's very important aesthetically to players, but there's dozens or hundreds of different floors that you could potentially see, and they're going to be spawned differently. There may be a treasure chest containing a boon, which we can talk about later, which are these little power-ups that you can get that'll help you, that only work inside of Torghast for that run. and that might be in the middle of a hallway. You might see that same hallway again 3 weeks later, and it's spawned up with completely different creatures. There's no chest there. That element of I don't know what's going to be around the next corner is going to be there every time you go through. In the experience itself, like the aesthetic and the art is handcrafted, but the gameplay itself is going to be completely different every time you go through.
You had
So as another kind of follow-up with Torghast as well, and follow-up to the legendary stuff. So what is it that's going to get players to keep coming back over and over again throughout the course of this expansion? Like, I guess if I wanted to make a certain legendary, and I make it during the first tier of the expansion, am I going to be able to make a higher item level version of that tier, like towards the end of it?
I think we're still figuring out, but yeah, ultimately the goal is we want you. This is a place you want to return to for player reasons, for player agency reasons, and even if you're kind of satisfied with the state of your legendary at the moment, there's other reasons to go into Torghast that may be related to. There's a really cool mount that I want to get that only drops in Torghast. I want to make sure that I can get that. So we're gonna make sure that there's a lot of reasons that players are going to want to go back there continually.
Also, along with that, just like the choices that you get to make when you're bringing those items to that runesmith, you get to decide what you want. So your first time going through and you're like, okay, I got that item, awesome. You may realize, oh, I should have picked those other elements. So you're going to go back in there. You're going to try to get that same item or something similar and then craft it differently.
Speaking of Torghast, is it going to be something that you can repeat as many times as you want the same day, or is it on like a weekly lockout or anything like that? I know I'm thinking of like the Withered training scenario. I think that was on a lockout. Is this similar to that, or?
Similar at the moment. I mean, everything's always TBD, but yeah, we're thinking it's something that you'll want to make sure that you progress through at least once a week.
Let's go back there if you want to go back there. Let's go. I mean, right. I was going to ask about covenants, and they've been discussed as being sanctuary like Legion had for their class halls. Does this mean that we will be welcoming and working with the opposite faction inside these areas? And then follow up to that, just being that, are there any benefits to being in a raid or a group with members of the same covenant or members of other covenants? Is there like a combination that's beneficial?
So to address the first question, the Horde and the Alliance, we're in a bit of an uneasy armistice right now. Back on Azeroth, and the Covenants have a whole host of problems of their own, like, Anima, this mana of the Shadowlands, is drying up. It's extremely scarce, and so the Covenants they care about that. They care less about the problems of some mortal world off and somewhere else in the Warcraft cosmos. So they're going to recruit Horde and Alliance. We're going to work together if we're Horde and Alliance and in a Covenant. We're going to create a sanctum, which is analogous to kind of how we built up Shadowlands in Legion, and so those uneasy alliances will continue through that. So it will be similar to the Order Hall in that capacity. Did that answer?
Yep, that answered. The second one was just about whether or not being in a group with people of the same covenant or a different covenant benefits you, or it's very individual, your choice.
So particularly in Torghast, people, depending on which covenant they chose, your powers will get kind of magnified, and there may be like doors that will only unlock for one covenant or another. Like there may be, or some you may have to use the teleportation ability to get across a chasm or something like that. We're exploring ways that we can have multiple covenant people of different covenants can benefit, or maybe only that one person can go. So we'll again, we're experimenting with that, but we're pretty excited about the possibility of what players can do.
Thank you.
Let's go.
When talking about legendaries, always Torghast comes in talk. So from what I understand, you will, let's say I want more crit on my boots, the legendary effect. So it's only Torghast the way I go to obtain the materials for that, or is that some come from Mythic Plus, some come from raiding, some come from PvP, or how would that work to obtain these specific materials for it?
So right now, Torghast is your primary source of powering your legendary. Yeah.
Are lore questions fair game?
We can try.
Just a quick question. I'm not a lore buff by any stretch of imagination, but the Helm of Domination, before that existed, how did the Shadowlands and world realm balance work? Because it didn't exist forever, right? I think Ner'zhul created it, or sorry, LG.
Yeah, we're going to explore that actually as we go through Shadowlands. You're going to meet, some mysterious people that are very good at crafting things like legendaries that may have had a hand in, and may be able to help explain a lot of how that came into being.
You talked about legendaries. I assume you'll also be able to probably add a gem slot into legendaries. Are gem slots still going to be like randomized on here?
So itemization is very important to the team, and we're exploring a lot of the feedback that we've gotten through BFA on a variety of subjects, including sockets. And it's a little bit early to talk about where exactly all that's going to land, but we do want the professions to feel very meaningful again. And so what we do with jewel crafting is equally important to us.
So it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that these zones are going to be instanced from each other, like you can't just fly from one zone to the other, you would teleport or something like that. Is that going to influence the way that flying will be unlocked later in the expansion? Like, for example, hey, I maxed out my covenant, and now the covenant gave me a license that says, hey, I can fly now. Is there going to be anything like that?
There'll still be a transportation system that goes between the two. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to handle the flying once it's unlocked. So that's still, again, like TBD. But when you're going from the main hub, Oribos, to a zone, that there is a taxi system from that. So there won't be teleporting.
This is kind of a lower question, but I was curious. Since these new allied races can be Death Knights, is there going to be any new Death Knight starting experience? I know we have the Exiles Reach, but is there...
There's
Bolvar away from them?
yeah. So their story will be towards Bolvar. He's the one that's calling the allied races because we don't want to affect that lore with the previous group. So this time around, there's a special in-game cinematic that helps to explain that, and you get to see Bolvar sort of talking to the allied race and sort of asking them, like, you joined with us, you're going to help us.
If we're already in the Shadowlands, and Shadowlands are where people of Azeroth go when they die, what happens when you die in Shadowlands? I know that in the demo, when you die in Shadowlands, you almost are a wraith. You're not really your normal self.
Correct.
So I was curious what that was.
From a lore perspective, probably not the right people to comment. I'm not sure that anyone has fully understood that yet. But yeah, we did understand that it didn't make a lot of sense to just do the same thing we do in Azeroth. So yeah, we did come up with that special unique effect to connect your soul back to your body specifically for Shadowlands. Let's go right there. Orange shirt.
So there's more focus on class identity in this coming expansion and making it more like things across all specs. But I was wondering how that works for priests, because the holy priests and discipline are all about the light and stuff, and shadow, at least in the last 2 expansions, has been very light focused. Those are kind of opposites. So I was trying to figure out how you make the whole class feel whole if that's kind of the way it exists.
I think that's a very good question, and I think we'll figure out the best that we can do with priests. I mean, we're going to figure it out, but I can talk about, like, I'm a Death Knight, so I actually have gone over and bugged the systems designers about Death Knights in particular. I play Blood. That's the spec I spend all of my time in, even role questing. And so kind of asking them questions like, what does this mean for me? And they've mentioned, well, we'd like Death Coil, for instance, to be, once again, a class identifying ability. So, like, we should put that on all the specs. Death and Decay should be on all the specs. That's a class-defining ability. Chains should be on all specs. So now it's like, who's going to change that? Who's going to chain that mob over there? You can say we have a DK instead of, do we have a DK? Oh, but he's Blood, pick somebody else. Right. So similarly, something for Priest would happen. I would imagine that we'll go through all those abilities and for every class, and which of these do we think are class defining, are traditional, and should be on all of the specs, and which ones are kind of the flavor that help to define what your spec is.
For higher level dungeons and raids, now that you do have these class identity things and creators have gotten so optimized. What's the plan to try to make sure that the balance is there so that certain classes aren't completely ostracized?
I think that's actually one of our motivations for wanting to do this, is to make sure that people can rely on certain classes having a toolkit as opposed to a spec having a toolkit. So I think that might be the best way to answer that question. We actually think it'll help us balance.
So it seems like in previous expansions, a big part of the character progression in Shadowlands is going to be tied to a feature that, hey, we get it and it's awesome, and then it's going to be taken away. Is WoW going to continue following that sort of trend of borrowed powers, or at some point are we going to get something where our characters can just grow and that keeps from expansion to expansion?
I think it just depends on the story that's being told. Currently, we want to make sure that you finish off the Battle for Azeroth with your necklace, and then you can still carry that into the Shadowlands. It's just all of the powers it has will be shut off. It just depends on what we want to do this time around. We're going to focus on the anima, and that's more of a it's the mana for the Shadowlands, but it's scarce. So this is something we're going to learn about, and then as well you're going to obtain new abilities because of it. So yeah, it depends on the story that the designers are coming up with. So, yeah.
For the soul line, you can swap between who you soul line to, and they have the talents and everything. Does that talent change based on the class or spec at all?
So the customization from the Soulbind is primarily going to come from your ability to, there's kind of, I want to call them, there's spaces in those talent trees that you can fill with items you can get through the world called conduits. It's a little bit like, if you want to think about relics from Legion, like some things you can put in there that'll help you decide what you want to have in that talent slot. So that's how you're going to be able to customize based on either your role or your class.
With the new Covenant system, which will give you new abilities, will there be a way to basically respec if you decide, you know what, I think this ability is more to my liking,
yeah.
And if not, how do you ensure that the player makes the right choice? So during the leveling, will they be able basically to test out the abilities?
Absolutely. As you level all the way from Bastion to Revendreth in the game, you're going to come across each covenant. You're going to learn a little bit about their story. That's going to help you make an informed decision about maybe thematically which one you want to align with. But also for people who are primarily interested in those abilities, while you're in those zones, they're going to grant you access to those abilities. So you're going to be able to try like that passive movement and that active ability before you get to maximum level, so that you can make a more informed decision at that time when you choose your covenant. That said, if you choose later on that you're like, yeah, maybe I don't want to be a Revendreth, I want to be a Ardenweald, I want to join the Ardenweald Covenant, you'll be able to do that. It'll be more similar to how maybe in Burning Crusade you pick the Aldor, and then at some point said, you know what, I actually want to be a Scryer. It wasn't an easy choice. There was some work to do, but that we wanted to be more along those lines.
In Legion, when you first introduced World Quests and Emissaries, and you carried that through into BFA, we've talked a bit about how Azerite power is not going to be something that needs to be ground anymore. Mm-hmm. What is sort of the motivation for doing those daily activities now if you're removing that power increase, that regular power increase from those activities?
Well, I mean, a lot of World Quests today don't necessarily have Azerite power as their end goal, right? There's plenty of other rewards that we're able to give, and we're actually looking at the World Quest system and looking to kind of overhaul it. We call it World Quest 2.0, and so we're going to reveal more of that as we get through beta and closer to release.
Okay.
Far left.
As somebody who mainly plays Classic, I've really come to appreciate the 1 to 60 journey, and making it seem like each level really matters. And I guess what I want to ask is, did you guys consider changing the level squish to, did you experiment with like 1 to 70 or 1 to 80, or was 1 to 60 kind of a no-brainer for you guys in terms of appreciating the journey?
It's a good question. Yeah, that number is something we played around with in conjunction with what were some of our other goals. And so there were two goals, right? Make the levels matter. So looking for a right number of levels where we can make that matter. And then the other one is, can we finally get cohesive stories to be able to be told like an expansion level story? And if we squished it down to 80, that's a lot of levels to go through on an expansion. You're dinging at a lot faster cadence. So 50 was kind of the number we settled on that felt right. The pacing felt right to go through an expansion. And that's the number we settled on.
So now we're getting past one full expansion where we had forced personal loot and with the item level trade restrictions totally across the board. So what has the feedback been like on your end throughout this expansion, and are there any tweaks based on said feedback?
Yeah, we get feedback both internally and externally, and that's one of those things that we do get feedback on, and we're going to discuss, and then itemization is very important to the team right now, and how we are going forward and approaching it. It's one of the top priorities of the team, so we'll certainly consider that.
To get back to the soulbind system for a minute, I was going to ask about maybe the design goals for that. Do you see players wanting to swap between different soulbinds as they move around, and is that going to be punishing? And beyond the high level ability that you get for picking a particular soulbind, are the trees unique per soulbind? And do the conduits that you mentioned, do they carry between different soulbinds, where you want to target specific things and have uniqueness within the trees?
Right, so it will not be punishing to switch. A soulbind is as simple as changing your talents out, so you can go back to town. Like as an example, there's of a soulbind. There's the one that gives you has an ability, a passive ability that gives you a higher crit chance. It's called Arrogance. If you have more health than your enemy, that might be useful if like you're a rogue on a patchwork style fight. So you're like, oh, we're going to go do that one. I'm going to go swap my soulbind over to that soulbind, and then there might be others to give you maybe more dodge or passive abilities that you might want for other fights. So we want players to be able to experiment between the soulbinds. We think that gives you yet another level of player agency. In terms of the conduits, much like relics, you're going to slot that into that soulbind. You're going to slot another one into that soulbind, and that's going to again help you make your choice about how you want those soulbinds to work with your character.
All right. Are there going to be any more other BFA expansion features coming forward, like say Warfronts, for instance?
Warfronts were kind of a uniquely BFA thing. They made a lot of sense, and Islands as well. They were about the battle for Azeroth, so those features are going to remain with Battle for Azeroth. Back row.
With the level squish thing, so 10 to 50 is going to be where you pick different story elements or and is the idea with the level squish that the previous expansions kind of fit into that 10 to 50 experience, and then say with whatever Shadowlands, we would stay in that 10 back to 60 leveling range for that content, or is it an increasing level cap again?
I think we have a few years to figure that out. So I think we'll be a lot smarter. I think about a year and a half from now.
I just want to ask about the soulbind conduits. Going back to that again, it's from the sound of it. Is it going to work like the Essence system works now, where you essentially have a library of ones that you're choosing from to put in, or are they consumables that you find and you're consuming each time you put them in, destroying them when you swap them?
So right now they're akin to relics, so you will slot it to a soulbind from your bag or wherever, and then it will be gone. It will be consumed.
Okay.
So you guys said that the leveling time from 10 to 50 has been shortened in general. Do you guys have a sort of a ballpark time you're trying to aim for how long it's going to take people to get through that?
We're trying to make sure that when you choose which expansion you want to play through, that will take up that whole time. So that way you're able to focus on an expansion you loved or you didn't really have a chance to play through before. So the 10 to 50 should last that entire expansion. Now, if you decide to, you know, halfway through, I'm going to jump into another expansion, you can totally do that.
Are you going to do any evening across some of the expansions so that that the leveling is more consistent? Like, I think I'm trying to say is like Battle for or Warlords of Draenor might be the fastest leveling experience. Are you going to even them out so that they're all about the same pacing? Or?
Yep, we got a little bit of work to do, but yeah, we want the pacing to be fairly similar. You know, it might not be exact, but it should be similar.
Consider going to the level squish stuff. Once you hit level 10, I guess to be frank, like at level 10, will players on alts, will they be able to fly at that point? Because there are some instances where flying is pretty important early on, and in other instances, flying is not required at all.
Much like today, whatever level we set flying at, so if I go to Warlords of Draenor and I'm at a flyable level and I've already unlocked Pathfinder, I should be able to do flying.
So I was curious what the plans are for the existing profession materials and whatnot that exist for the 1 to 50, I guess, content now. Is that also being shrunk down? Is there going to be like a universal pool, or what happens?
That's a good question. Again, that's something we're going to have to figure out. I think it impacts mostly probably the more vanilla content, right, where you had a wider array of materials. So that's a good question.
So at the end of the Fourth War, we had a bunch of talks about, oh, maybe cross-faction possible now, and with the whole issue with the class balance in the high end of PvP and PvE, are there any plans to a solution to like aid that, or is still cross-faction not a thing? So Horde alliance and Nemesis, but they still want to group together against Shadowlands.
So it's what we like to call an uneasy armistice. Horde and alliance is Warcraft, right? Like it's the core pillar. Like if you removed everything else, it is Horde on one side, alliance on the other. So we don't have any plans to change that anytime soon.
Getting back to the covenant system, just a question about sort of the high level goals for that. Is there sort of like the idea that it'll grow alongside of us for the entirety of the expansion? We'll have the starting leveling experience, and then the initial max level stuff to do the covenant. As patch content comes in, will that system be expanded upon and carry us through new cosmetics or even maybe new abilities coming into that system? Is that kind of part of the idea right now?
It is one of the main, it's the main feature for the game, one of the main features. So it's definitely something that they're going to keep adding to. We're not at that point to really know where we're headed with them, but it is a key feature. So I would say we're definitely going to keep going with it.
Right. So every covenant's going to have its version of covenant campaign. Like if you remember the war campaign, we'll have covenant campaigns. But it is a system, yeah, like Steve said, that we can grow, whether that's more soul lines or whatever. Like we can make and kind of figure out what is going to be best for the goals for the players to pursue, what's going to be best for providing more content and agency for players.
I want to ask about allied races. When it comes to the unlocks right now, they require a certain amount of reputation to be able to get the quest chain, to be able to start doing all those unlocks. Are we looking at that being removed a bit with the new leveling system coming in? Because if you don't level through that expansion, you don't pick that expansion, you don't get those reputations. So you have to return once you're max level to actually go through that content to earn those reputations.
I think they're currently, they're looking at that and they're trying to decide like how that fits in with all of this, that they haven't really determined at this point.
Your covenant hall is supposed to be your home going into it. Will it have conveniences like auction house trainers or stuff that you can unlock later?
Right, good question. Think of it more akin to an order hall, like from Legion. So it's a place you're going to want to visit very often. That's going to be your base of kind of like launching out into the world for covenant-related things. But there's still going to be Oribos, the city in the middle. That's going to be like the Dalaran of the expansion. So there's going to be a lot. That's a lot of profession trainers and all of those things will be kind of huddled around in there. So more analogous to kind of the situation we had in Legion with Order Halls. Orange shirt.
So, art question. I think the name of the zone you have to play in the demo was Bastion. So I was playing that and it's pretty, but I also noticed that like all of the colors everywhere seem very like muted in a way. And I was just curious about like what the thought process behind the design on that was.
That one we've been going back and forth with it. We're still working with some of the lighting in there. It's not final. We're trying to really pull off when the player enters this zone. It's something that's very glorious and serene, kind of like this is the zone that is the heavenly plains or fields of heaven.
Right.
So this is Warcraft's version of heaven, at least for this particular zone. So, but yeah, looking at it.
Is there any specific class or class spec that you feel is not necessarily working well that you were looking at drastically changing or really overall in the next expansion?
That's when I will say this is not the right group to particularly answer that question. We're not the sim runners necessarily. I do know if there is one that the team does feel like, yeah, absolutely, they're going to look at it. We're very invested in the player's fantasy and the class fantasy, which is one of the reasons we are unpruning a lot of these abilities and trying to bring them back together. Man, okay. Yeah, I wish like everyone had like straws and we could just like take one every time we ask a question. Let's go.
Is there any process to unlock some of the customizations for characters that are coming, or is it just they're all unlocked at the beginning of Shadowlands?
They're all unlocked, yeah. So you'll go in, you'll start to see all these new cosmetics. Obviously, if you're already playing your main, go into the barber shop and you'll be able to access that.
On the show floor, there were several examples shown about for the new customization options. And I was curious, with the human, there were three heads with one with more Asian features. So the faces look far more distinct than now. They weren't just a different shade of color.
Yeah.
So I was curious, there was a bit of discussion since the remake with the high definition update of the old races, that some races have a very same face-ish, so a same face syndrome. Some people call it. That's, with the new customization options, the face will be more distinct of some of the races.
For some of them, it's mainly the skin tones. For humans, they'll have the most regarding the geometry on the face in order to pull off a lot of that ethnic representation for them. What you saw in that image is just the beginning of it for the humans. There's still a lot more work we've got to apply to them. But yes, like we're trying to see where we can, what each race specifically needs to just add more fun options for the player. Like we showed for the undead, you're not, you don't have to worry about having your bones exposed. You can now look like a fresh undead or scourge race, or the dwarves. You can now have those wild hammer tattoos and the hairstyles. So we're being very careful with each specific race because we know what the players have been asking for, and that's what we're trying to apply as best we can in the amount of time that we have.
In the demo, when you grouped up, when you joined the dungeon, you say dungeon difficulty set to Maw. Is that an issue from the demo, or is that something that's planned or scrapped? Or?
What was I missed the...
The dungeon difficulty set, there was a dungeon setting, it was Maw.
Yeah. Okay. That's good feedback. We'll let people know that was the difficulty. Yeah, that didn't necessarily mean
A question again about the new customization options. Will we see anything that's like a prestige unlock for having maybe a max level character of a certain race, or something it's kind of analogous to the Night Warrior customization options we saw in PFA? Are there going to be maybe customization options to work towards to earn at max level? That's something that's on the
The only like sort of max level would be like the Covenant, but that's specific to whatever rewards they offer. So like the armor sets, the back attachments amount that's up has a 3-tier upgrade, and anything else that we're adding as a reward. But that's the only thing at this time that we're hoping players will work towards.
Is there going to be a mission table for the Covenant like there have been in previous expansions?
The offline progression system, we're looking at exploring options in that space. We're definitely, it's been 3 expansions now that we've provided something along those lines. So we're looking at, when we carry the system forward, what does that look like? Is it going to fit into the Shadowlands? And we'll have more to announce on what that's going to look like.
About 15 minutes left.
All right.
Are there any plans to update or upgrade product features to, say, the guild management tools and so
the short answer to that is we do have some updates coming in terms of your helping people find guilds and find communities that they want to join, and also how I might want to advertise those. We're always open to feedback from people about, in general, better tools that they might want to see in the game.
If you choose your Covenant and you get your rewards like the wings and stuff, and you change later, does that stay in your Transmog, or does that not meet the requirement for that Covenant to use it?
Gosh, that I cannot answer that. I am not sure. That's one thing I am not sure about. Sorry.
The Genie's Covenants.
Well, with Transmog, can you Transmog it if let's say you switch to Revendreth? Yeah.
I think that's something you guys are still.
I think we're still working on it.
Do you know anything about the changes that the level switch will affect with the boost for character boosting that's going to be happening? And as I have a follow up to that too, but I was just curious if you know anything about the boosts and whether it's going to just boost to 50 or what the.
We'll still figure out what the exact level is going to be for boost going forward.
The follow-up to it is just, right now, when a character does boost, there isn't a really great system in place for helping characters get to know their character and what abilities they've learned and that sort of stuff. I was wondering if there's anything being addressed or thought about for like a tutorial system for characters who've received a boost or characters who have leveled up in that way, or switching specs at max level, maybe they leveled Shadow all the way up, they're switching the Holy to heal in that situation. Something that came to Warlord's version of the trials that they did for learning roles.
Well, we did have the trial in Legion as well, where you could try the different classes out before you actually chose to play that class. So probably going to keep something like that.
There was some talk about like the mythic class dungeons, and then when you open the chest, not to get the items. Now it's more like you get a choice. Is there anything like that coming to say the bonus roll system? Like if you get a piece of loot drop, roll bonus roll, and you get the same piece of loot, and you're like, well, there goes the point.
Interesting you mentioned that. We're still discussing how bonus rolls fit in. We have a lot of ideas that to change what that system looks like and what a bonus roll might provide, and how it might even tie into the chest even. So we're still figuring out how to give players those choices on those rewards, like in that weekly chest, and how it's going to tie into the greater economy of itemization and player choice.
And follow up to that, on bonus rolls, is there any plans to maybe allow bonus roll items to be tradable to the group you're in?
I think that's going to depend on where we settle with the future of bonus rolls.
When talking about covenants, there was discussed that the mount for covenants will be upgradable. Can you elaborate more, upgradable aesthetically, or eventually may have it will fly now and maybe have vendors? Or
currently it's aesthetic, yeah. So as you get the first one, it looks it only has maybe like a saddle and a few other items on it, and then as you progress, you see that it's starting to get armored up to a point where you can then upgrade to the highest level, which obviously you've got the wings and everything on it, so that way you can kind of brag about it to everybody when you get to that point. And that's what's kind of nice, is that we made sure on the art side that that also helps to complement the armor and the back attachment that you have on there, so it all feels like a complete package as you're wearing it. So you feel really good about it.
Sure. Whenever you're starting to work on a new expansion, you're always developing new tools internally to actually do new things in more exciting ways within the game. Is there anything technology-wise or art-wise that you've got to do for Shadowlands that you've wanted to do inside BFA but weren't able to, but now you're excited to actually be able to unveil in Shadowlands?
Yeah.
Both of
you can answer.
Me first. There's a few things. Like strictly on the technology side, we've begun to work with some of our hardware vending partners on ray tracing to particularly for shadows, to, so that we can get a lot more detail in self-shadowing in particular, and some nice realistic shadows as they kind of disperse away from the character. In terms of what we've been able to do inside of the game that a lot of players that maybe aren't running a 2080 are going to notice is a lot of the we're changing in providing our dungeon artists and our building artists with a lot more tooling to be able to do some more interesting lighting, especially a lot of the lighting that you can get in the outside world. We've also provided the ability for them to use the technology we call spotlights, and they can put textures on those. And one real interesting thing it's great to provide these tools to artists first of all, and then watch like 3 weeks later they come back and are like, look what I did. And so what they did in Revendreth was there's these stained glass windows and some of these like Gothic structures, and they put spotlights on them, and now it looks like as you run under them that you're being lit by the sun through a stained glass window, and it's super cool. And I think players are going to get a kick out of just the little details like that are going to help the world feel alive.
That example like really helps sell more mood into the game. It brings that in there. And when we first saw that, we were freaking out. We're like, oh my gosh, have the character run by it again and again. And speaking of Revendreth, one of the achievements we made was something that was very different. Was we have, if you look down at the art gallery, there's that postcard image of the castle. So when we had that, there was a meeting going on. Someone mentioned, hey, you know what? What if that was the entire zone, was that structure? So we've never done that before. So we went ahead, tried to figure it out, and that's sort of like taking a little bit of what we did with Torghast as we were working on it, is these modular pieces. So the art team went in and tried to figure out, okay, what are the pieces necessary to create this giant, elaborate castle that the player's going to traverse all around. So we figured that out, handed it off to level design, and they started piecing it all together, constructing this castle. And it's amazing to see that there's areas I'm like, was that one entire piece, or is it, how many pieces is that? So it was really great to have that collaboration, and based off somebody just yelling it out in a meeting, looking at it, they're like, hey, what if that's just the zone itself? So that was one of our biggest challenges, and we accomplished it.
Just a little quick follow-up. Do you know how many variations there are of Torghast that you can run into? Is it like just massive?
Man, it's a number larger than I can probably count.
So it's very unlikely someone would be able to do it twice. Like the same thing twice is very unlikely.
Very unlikely you'll see the same sequence of hallways, creatures, boons, treasures, rewards. Almost non-existent.
One of the covenants had the transforming, shape-shifting things, and they mentioned that they'll have prestige versions of it. The other covenants have their own prestige version of their special ability.
You're turning into a wolf.
It's different. Yeah, it'll be different per covenant. They have each of their special abilities, and then as you're progressing in that covenant, you'll get stronger and stronger. And as well as when you're going into Torghast, those abilities are gonna get even bigger because of the things those boons that Frank was talking about.
Like rank 4 essences, like people got that special legendary essence, it looks far different.
I think on the art side, it may do that. Right now, we're at the early stages, so it's knowing exactly. We're always making sure, especially with like working with Frank's team, like performance-wise, like how crazy can we make something. He's the one that usually comes down on our floor and is like, what is going on with all this? It's a mess. So we'll dial things back. So right now we're at those early stages of like, okay, how far can we take these things? And then from there we'll know.
was gonna say, tying into that, we saw the backpack as one of the rewards for the recruit a friend. Now we have, sort of like wing cloaks and behind the helm stuff. Are there any other item slots that you're looking at doing something a little bit more far out there with, as far as the back slot goes, or maybe like a librum on your hip or something like that?
I think like what we had back in BFA was the Armor 2.0, which added a little bit more to the armor sets, where you could add some of those props. Like you notice on like the hips, we've added like other areas to help just pump up the armor sets just visually. This time around, we're focusing on the back attachment. It's something new to us, so we're exploring it. We dabbled with it with, let's say, the recent Recruit a Friend, where that little traveler backpack, that was kind of our first test to see how it was going. And then we added one in 8.3 as well. And so this is sort of like now, that was the foundation. Now we're starting to play more with it, with these awards or rewards, and then see where it takes us after this.
There's time for one or two more questions.
Let's go farther.
This one's kind of outside the Shadowlands, but I was wondering if there's any plans to bring back the mobile auction house.
Well, we're continuing to develop the mobile companion app. Auction house isn't in the immediate future of that. I think we're focused mostly on how it can provide a lot of good use to, we want to improve the experience there. That's our first and primary motivation right now is that, and then also supporting the features that are going to be driven for both. We're currently in development for Azeroth and then in the future for Shadowlands.
So mount equipment seems to have been mostly designed to solve the water strider problem, but are there any new pieces that are being discussed?
I think from what I know, they're still like TBD. They're looking into it. They realize, like having a special mount like that water strider, obviously took advantage of a lot of things. But they're trying to explore other ways for those mounts. Yeah.
I know Jeremy's not here, but I'm curious that the pet battle dungeon thing has continued throughout BFA. I'm curious if we're going to continue doing that into Shadowlands, whether it'll be Shadowlands versions or earlier versions added in for other pet battle dungeons.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know Jeremy is dedicated to giving people as many pets as we will let him make. So,
Yes.
and I know he actually has some things up his sleeve for Shadowlands.
Okay, thanks.
Last question.
Yeah.
Will there be any squish in terms of the value of items in terms of gold? Like, so if you have like 5 million gold, will that somehow get downscaled in a way? Just thinking about like the level 60 value of gear, like in Classic compared to BFA, where you could have millions of gold.
Yep. I can tell you my character hopes not. So, I'm not aware of any current plan to actually do that. Are we good? One more?
We can probably squeeze one more.
One more.
It's really quick, but have you ever guys thought of introducing like platinum? It goes on from that question, like 2 orders of magnitude higher than gold, like platinum and gold, silver, copper.
It's an interesting idea. I don't know that it's one that we've
solved a little bit of that issue. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your show, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.